You're listening to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and it's time for this week's Long Island News, the show that talks to newsmakers and other important people from Nassau and Suffolk County that matter to Long Island and Long Islanders like you. So each week we'll have a conversation about issues that affect all of us. I live on Long Island just like you, and I want to know more about where my tax dollars are going, and I want to know more about the people making the big decisions that affect all of us. Well, this week, I'm happy to welcome to our show for the first time Nassau County Legislator Ms. Delia DeRiggi-Whitton. She serves the 11th District here in Nassau County, which includes Sands Point, Port Washington, Roslyn Harbor, Glen Head, Glenwood, Cliff and Glen Cove. Welcome to this week's Long Island News.
Thank you very much for having me.
Boy, that's a lot of towns
My district encompasses the whole area around Hempstead Harbor, so it's actually a beautiful district.
Very scenic district there. Yeah. Okay, so let's start with learning a little bit more about you. I know you have a political background being on the Glen Cove City Council before becoming a legislator, but tell us more about your background and where you came from.
Sure. Well, I was born in Manhattan, but we moved to Glen Cove when I was young, and my father, they fell in love with the trees, so he wanted his daughter to have a backyard with trees to play in. So then my father became very involved and was the mayor of Glen Cove for 3 terms, and then later became a criminal judge. So I grew up in Glen Cove. It's come up a lot lately, but I played softball at Glen Cove High School and pitched a no-hitter where we won the county championship, and it hasn't been done since then. So we're hoping this year. I have friends who have children on the team this year, so we're hoping they break that record.
Excellent.
I then went to Hofstra.
Okay.
And I lived there, which was a great experience. Tower C, and I met people from all over. I was actually a psychology major and got into graduate school for special education. My father wanted me to go to law school. I said, no, I'm swearing off law and politics. Here I am. Yeah. But anyway, psychology, I was a psychology major, which also was very helpful, I think, in a lot of things that I end up dealing with day to day. Mm-hmm. So I worked in the private sector, and then I was married, and I was still working when my 3-year-old was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And it really was impossible to leave her with anyone for more than 5 minutes. Right. So I had her and a younger one. So while I was a stay-at-home mom, I started to get involved with raising money for the Diabetes Research Institute Foundation. I had a meeting with some of my friends from high school, and I asked one friend from high school who had a restaurant if she would help. Had she said no, I would have forgotten about it, because I really wasn't crazy about asking people for money. Mm-hmm. But we just had our 17th dinner, and we've raised well over $1 million just from our little group.
Wow.
And we had car shows, and I wrote grants, and I'm on the board of the Northeastern Diabetes Research Institute board. They're doing incredible research. I really think we're going to be part of a cure. And I also volunteer with new parents that are newly diagnosed, but things are so much better than they were. There's so much technology. So at one of my dinners, the then mayor, Ralph Swazi, attended. To make a long story short, he asked me to run for city council, and I was shocked. And I said yes after speaking with my husband and everything. And it was a really great decision. We worked very well together, because you have to remember his father, Swazi, and DeRiggi were big names in Glen Cove. They used to run against each other, and they really didn't like each other. So naturally, Ralph and I became friends because we thought our parents were. So we worked well together, and it was bipartisan, and we did a lot of good things. And then later, 4 years later, I was asked to run for county legislature, and I've been there for 12 years now.
Okay. Wow. 12 years, and you said 9 elections?
9 elections. This is my 9th election. It's a lot.
That's wild, yeah. But as we talked before the show a little bit about, that idea that a lot of the legislators are not complaining, but bringing up the idea that they only get to be in office for two years. And when you get to work and start doing something, when you finally put your head up, you realize, oh my God, it's coming again. Mm-hmm. And so you're constantly in a state of campaigning.
Right.
Which I guess, they look, but like we said too, and you had mentioned a referendum was actually done in Glen Cove.
Correct.
And the people were...
It was voted down. We were going to extend it to 4 years, and it was voted down by a good amount. And that was about 10 years ago, which sent me a good message, that people want control of their local government, especially. If they don't like you, they vote you out.
Yeah,
and in Glen Cove, that happens a lot. It goes back and forth between parties. Right. And I've been lucky. The way I look at it is I don't look at it as really campaigning. To do this job right, you really need to be out. I try to limit it to 4 nights a week, and it's almost every weekend, right? Which is hard on sometimes with your family, but my kids are good. They know how to Uber Eats quite well.
How old are you?
Well, now they're older. When I was first elected, my youngest was 3.
Oh boy!
But she's now 19 in Sacred Heart University. She just came home.
Oh wow!
2 days ago and brought more stuff than I can even imagine fit into a dorm room. And then I have 2 older ones. Christine just is graduating on May 23rd from Adelphi Clinical Psychology Master's Program. And my oldest is actually married. She's 26. She married her college sweetheart and lives in Connecticut. So, yeah. Okay. So they're older now. But when they were younger, it was. But they were really kids were. They don't always tell you, but there were little signs here and there that they were supportive and they enjoyed the whole process.
Oh, I bet they learned a lot too.
They did. Yeah. I brought them to a lot of things that. See, that's the thing. When you think about it as campaigning, it can be a negative, but when you're out all the time and you're meeting people you learn so much about your community. And you, even going door to door, you see neighborhoods that you don't normally see, and all these events.
I think the kids too get this sense that they, they see you engaged, because I think most of the population, on this show, we've kind of discovered that, assemblymen and council people, and those are the people you call when you have a problem.
Correct.
But most people feel as though, I don't want to bother him about this thing. and we've come to learn that, no, that's the guy you should bother about this thing.
I feel that a lot of people feel that we're approachable because my office is pretty busy, but I welcome that. That's what we're supposed to do.
Well, I'm sure you have a regular line of regular complainers too.
Yeah.
That's a different thing,
It's an interesting time. Unfortunately, probably a third of my calls recently have been families in very bad situations with different addictions and opioid. I've become very involved with that.
Right. We're going to get to that.
We can talk about that later.
Yeah.
But you get your potholes. I would say probably at least a third of my calls. It's not a county issue, which is hard for people to understand. Like there are city issues, there are county issues, there's state issues, there's federal issues. So people get frustrated sometimes, but we are at least able to direct them in the right direction. Right. And then I always say, if you don't get an answer, call me back and I'll try to.
Right. Well, yeah, because if you're giving that out as an answer and it's not working, you don't want to keep
call me back.
Giving it out. Yeah.
Right. Because I have a good working relationship with the different government, offices. When my legislative aide is very good. It's a funny story, but she lived next to my parents. She still does. So she has that job too, keeping an eye on them. But she was a babysitter for my brother and I when we were little, and now she works in my office. But it's really good. She really, it's like family without it being family, so that you're allowed to do it. But I trust her, and she has really developed into this role, and she knows so many people that she really can handle a lot of the calls. I mean, I'm still aware of them. I get the right, but a lot of times she'll know how to direct people, or else I'll talk to them. But she, it's good to have you really need someone that you can trust. And
definitely, I mean, if you don't, you can't. There's no way you could be on the phone all day and also be engaging. But okay, let's talk about one of the most talked about issues here in Nassau County. The proposal to have the Sands Resorts and Casino built where the Nassau Coliseum is now. What is the latest that you know about it, and how do you feel about the proposal?
This has been a very tough vote for me, which happens. I've been faced with a few tough votes. So there are 2 issues. One is, even if I totally supported having a casino and I thought it would really enhance our community, like if it was a project that I thought was great, I would still have a problem with the way this is happening. We are transferring a lease to a company for 99 years. This company doesn't know if they're getting the license for a casino. Right. And they have the sole decision to decide what to do if they don't get the lease for this 55-acre, $5 million piece of property.
So they don't have to proceed with the plan that they showed us.
They don't even have to come back to the legislature. It's actually written in the lease that the only person they have to speak to is the county executive. One person, one branch of government can decide what goes in there if they don't get the lease. And right now there are still 10 areas, vying for the lease. One is City Field, which is a pretty tough competitor from what I hear. And then there were a couple other ones that are still, so it's not a done deal. The license is not a done deal. So they also don't have a plan or a real clear drawing. We saw various angles, and I couldn't even figure out where Hempstead Turnpike was on it, to be honest.
Right.
I know it's up to the town to do the traffic studies and all, but even as the county, it's very hard to determine how they're getting. I think they're coming in actually by the entrance of Nassau, like around that area. Right. So we haven't even seen a real plan, basically. And so that's one issue. I really have a problem signing over a lease like that without it coming back to legislature if the license doesn't come through. I like checks and balances in government. Yeah. I don't like it being one person's decision.
Oh, it's open-ended.
Right. So I feel very uncomfortable with that. And I will be honest with you, I support labor, but I really have a concern about bringing a casino into our area. Mm-hmm. And no matter what you say, if you read these studies, it really, they can link, it's another form of addiction, Now, I know it's legal and I know people go on their phones, but having an actual building can really affect the area around us, around the casino. So we have the schools, we have Sloan Kettering just went in there. I just feel like we could do better than a casino in this area. And people say, oh, it's taken so long. Well, Scott Reckler came in RxR. They had, from what I thought was a very good proposal about 4 years ago. They had millennial housing, they call it, which would attract, young people to live there, reasonably priced. They were really looking to try to maybe do some type of tech company or some type of medical research company, really draw up kind of like a think tank area, which I really liked. And unfortunately, COVID hit and nothing happened. And people keep pointing to nothing happening, but it really was impossible to do anything during that time. So long story short, we were approached by Sands, or I don't know who approached who, but so they're coming in and saying they're going to, but they're promising a lot of money and a lot of jobs. They think they're going to get 20,000 people in a day.
To use the facilities?
To use the casino.
Here's what they said, that the casino area was only going to be 10% of the total build. Correct.
But if the casino doesn't come...
If it's only 10% of the bill, how do you get 20,000 people in there a day?
It's not a very large facility, but it's open 24 hours, 7 days a week. Their projection is, this is what they told me when I asked them on the record. So it is only 10% of this plan, but they actually said if they don't get the casino, the plan is not going to be anything like this. Right. So although they won't give us detail, that it's not going to be anything close to this. So it's really, although it's only 10% of the project, it's like the whole project.
Yeah. I've spoken to a couple of politicians and legislators, and I remember one of them basically said that the Nassau Coliseum was a missed opportunity. We spent $11 million to put up some fancy flashing on the outside of the building. Mm-hmm. And if I was conspiratorial, I would say that $11 million only served to make that arena not fitted for the NHL.
Correct.
Because they took seats out.
Exactly. They made it so that we're not eligible. I voted against that.
Well, who was at the wheel but that seems to me to be kind of a surgical... They ruined it. And it cost us $11 million to get it ruined, in the sense.
Well, you have to remember what was also happening at the same time, the UBS.
Well, that's another thing.
So I think that they were tied together.
I'm sure.
They might not have come had this Coliseum been able to continue to host like the Islanders.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So,
well, Robert Reich, I think he was the labor secretary for Clinton. But one of the things he said is that this is the new way. Building stadiums is the new way for the super rich to get tax money into their private pockets. that's what this is all about. Because I would ask anybody in Nassau County, have you seen the books on any of these things that people have put up? We don't know where the money came from. Mm-hmm. We don't know where it went.
Correct.
And you're talking about big bucks. Mm-hmm. And so a few 100,000, maybe $1 million can kind of disappear. And there would be no forensic paperwork guy to come up and say, oh, wait a minute, you can't do this or you can't do that. Yeah. That's the scary stuff. But he said the Nassau Coliseum was a missed opportunity, that we should have refurbished it. I don't know how big if they could have made the building any bigger, I don't know. But to just discard it is ridiculous.
I agree with you. I think that we could have done that. They wanted better locker rooms. They wanted a few things to stay. And I think it could have been done, but I think that there was a push to get this other place down on the South Shore. And I went to Hofstra. My roommate went to Hofstra because of the Islanders. She used to sit out the window and look out and see, who she could see with her binoculars. She was a little obsessed. We had orange everything all over my dorm room, but it was great to have a home team like that right in the middle of the island. Now it's a little tricky for people to get down to the South Shore, especially if you're from the North Shore. And,
well, the whole thing was a fiasco. With the initial parking, people parking through the neighborhoods, and people that lived there couldn't park on their own. Well, it's almost as though, let's just let this lion loose and see what happens. Okay, you saw what happened. It's the train station. They actually got you know how long that, well, yeah, you do. How long would that take a town to get a train station?
I know.
Even if it's for people that needed transportation to work. And then they only want to use the train station when there's a game on.
Right.
Wow.
I know, which doesn't fare well with other people that wanted train stations. Yeah, I know. And I will say, when they said they were taking the seats out, I was so upset about that, because that really closed the door.
It did.
And then they said, well, we don't need two Coliseums. Well, we had this one first, So Sands won't really say what they're doing, because I don't know if they even know for sure yet as far as their plans go. I've seen some drawings that look like the casino's part of the Coliseum. Then I've seen other where I can't find the Coliseum. So I don't know what they're going to decide.
I have to do this. There we go. Okay. You're listening to this week's Long Island News on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and my guest today is Nassau County Legislator Delia DeRiggi-Whitton. She serves the 11th District, which includes Sands Point, Port Washington, Roslyn Harbor, Glen Head, Glenwood, Sea Cliff, and Glen Cove. The other thing that I know you've been outspoken about was the importance of the Nassau County Inspector General. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, just yesterday, it was reported that the first person to hold this position in Nassau County, Jody Francesi, submitted her resignation.
Correct.
So first, can you tell us why having somebody in that role is important, in your opinion, and then what's the latest development? So
I lived through the Mangano years, where there was a lot of procurement issues, to say the least. Mm-hmm. And he's in jail for 12 years, which I never want to see happen again to anyone. Mm-hmm. So living through that time, I will tell you, I was a new legislator, but I saw so much. It was probably my second year in office. So 3 weeks after the storm, I got a call that there was a preserve right down the street from me, and that this tree company was in there cutting trees, live trees, not ones that had fallen down, live trees, and hauling them out. And they did it for the whole day. So I went down there, and you could see the havoc. Looks great service. They cut down 177 trees in the Wellwind Preserve. And when I got there, I was already past the point where it could, so someone told me they said they're going over to Garvey's Point Museum, which is another preserve in Glen Cove. Right. So at this point, I had a legislature meeting. I actually picked up my mom because I had to leave. So I went there, and there was trucks in the parking lot for tree companies, but the preserve looked pretty good. There really weren't any trees dangling, or it looked like it always did. The paths were clear, everything was fine. So I was trying to find somebody to talk to see what the heck was going on. And I get a call out of nowhere on my personal cell phone from someone in DPW who said, "Legislator, get off the property unless you're willing to sign a waiver saying that the area is," I can't make this up, that the area is safe, and if anything happens, it's going to be on your responsibility. I said, well, I would like to talk to someone who's here, to see exactly what trees they're talking about, because I don't see any damage. And it was quite nasty.
What are you guys fixing?
So to make a long story short, I had to leave to go to the meeting. So I left my mother there as a tree hugger. So I said, Ma, anybody starts, just call me. And, I had other people. I was like, we'll figure it out. But I want to get to the ledge, just tell them what's happening so that we can stop it. They ended up closing Garvey's Point office, having everyone go home. They put a security guard there, and then they closed the parking lot and put a rope thing. Needless to say, no trees were cut down there. But this was my first experience of they were getting paid per tree. So it was $1,000 per tree.
By who?
The county, through Sandy money. Fast forward a couple of weeks later, they have this contract for Sing, our friend Sing, to get all the food for first responders. And I looked through the menu, and I had been I take my kids everywhere when we go to like food shelters, and they've done a lot. And they're handing out cold turkey sandwiches and, not such appetizing meals to these people. And I look at the menu, and it's steak and Caesar salad.
That's what they charged for, but that's not necessarily what they delivered. But also, this was for the county employees and all these. They said supposedly they had all these people they were going to give food to, but the food was like first class, And I said, well, that's really not fair. Something just told me not to vote for it, so I voted against it. I was the only legislator who voted against it. And fast forward, Sing had a lot of contracts. So what used to happen is the contracts would come before the ledge, and we couldn't always tell who the principals were. We had no idea who they donated to, really, in the backup. Right. So we changed all that, and both sides worked together. We really fixed the procurement process to the fact that it's really difficult to. Right. I mean, I can say this, but Shore Road in Bayville got a $14 million contract. It turned out to go to the sitting comptroller's brother at the time. I couldn't find out who the principals were until when I saw who it was. I almost fell over when I saw who it was. Right. So anyway, now that can't happen. Now we know who the principals are. Oh, you do?
We know who they contributed to. We know if they've had any complaints with labor issues or anything else. We know how many minorities they employ, how many women they employ. We know if they're a veteran-owned business or minority-owned business. So that's all in the backup now. And that was a big fight. The other big part of this whole thing was to have an inspector general, which I love the idea of, because she comes in as an independent person, she or he, and looks at everything. And she would say whether or not she felt the contract was, whether she approved of it or if she had questions. And she would give us a report on every contract before the meeting. That was like a legislator's dream come true.
Yeah, really.
So
nice to know somebody's actually reading them.
The legislature, so we passed it a month before Laura Curran came into office. It wasn't passed before that. Right. So, okay, Laura embraced it. We were happy to have it. We went forward with it. Her contract was for 4 years. And the reason why it's so important to have a contract, or not really even a contract, it's I forget how they say it. It's a term, right. But it's part of the legislation, and she has to be reappointed for it every 4 years. But the reason you need that is to feel comfortable in telling the administration, wait, you can't give this contract out because there's this, and this. If you're not secure in your position, you're going to be afraid of being fired by administration. So what happened after her 4-year term is they did not reappoint her. So she's been working without a contract for the last 5-6 months. And I think she doesn't feel comfortable because she has no job security. Right. And her staff had no job security.
This is reminiscent of the federal government. What Republicans try to do in the Congress is basically gut the oversight committee. Is this analogous to that? I mean, we have an inspector general, but guess what? Nobody's calling her. Nobody's asking her to overlook anything.
That's what I'm afraid of is going to happen. I don't know who they're going to see. They technically, unless they get supermajority, which is another story, they are 1 seat away from I don't think any one party should have supermajority. I will tell you right now. Yeah. I don't think the Democrats or the Republicans should have it. I really believe in checks and balances. But they're 1 seat away from getting a supermajority, and at that point, they could vote to disband the entire office. Right. if they don't get supermajority, it's going to be interesting to see who they put in, because we really need someone who is serious and who is going to vet all these contracts and have the courage to go up to the administration and say, oh, I know you want to give this contract out, but no.
I think the word is fiduciary.
Responsibility,
Yeah.
100%. But it's even more than that. It goes deeper because, like, look at what happened. Like, you know, whenever you get an influx of money with the federal government with Superstorm Sandy or COVID
money,
right? There's really, you know, things happen quickly, and everyone, like, even when I voted against Singh, they said, "You're voting against Sandy." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm voting against this food that's going."
Well, I think, you know, the other thing is, I don't know, you're probably not old enough maybe to remember, W.T. Grant, there used to be a store, and it took them 10 years to figure out that they had gone bankrupt 10 years ago. So when I'm X years old, 20 years from now, or whatever it is, somebody will be telling me, oh, do you know what happened back in Nassau County in 2000? This. Because they only figured it out then. And these contracts, this is a lot of money we're talking about. Oh,
it's ridiculous amount of money. It's there are a lot of things that having an inspector general protects the elected officials and the taxpayers' money. And I know I sound naive, but in saying this, but I don't know why they wouldn't want to have one. And she was a good one. So I'm sorry to see. I'm sorry for the county that this happened, especially if you're right. We still have like $300 million, I believe it is, in opioid funding that has to be distributed. Also, the SANS is a major thing that should be watched as well. If we have a supermajority and no inspector general, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything, I hope that they're very careful, but there's always that chance that something could be missed. And that's what we need. We need as many eyes looking at things as possible.
I agree. Well, we don't have a lot of time left. Anything you want to say to the listeners?
I think people should get involved. Our meetings are in the afternoon, which is very inconvenient. They start at 1, but our agenda is always on the website. If there's anything you see that sparks an interest, I think it's great when people come down from the public and mention things. I'm big with the opioid issue, especially. I have a Narcan training this weekend. Also, the final thing, if you don't mind, there is a lot of money left over in our ARPA money, which is for basically recovery after COVID. So if any small businesses, any 501c3s, any veteran halls, just please go to Boost Nassau on our website. You can fill out the application there, or else you can make an appointment at Eisenhower Park, Field 6. There's an office there that will walk you through these applications. There's $10,000 per restaurant that's available. Even if you received $10,000 back a couple of years ago, apply again, because we have to get this money out. I don't know if you heard, but when they're talking about the debt ceiling, one of the things that they're mentioning in the federal government is calling back this money. It is going to drive me crazy if we have to give back any of this money and not give it to our businesses.
Boost Nassau?
Boost Nassau. Please look at it.
You heard it, folks. My guest today has been Nassau County Legislator Delia DeRiggi-Whitton from the 11th District here in Nassau County. And again, we want to thank you for taking the time to come here and speak with us. But the clock on the wall says it's time for this week's Long Island News to get on out of here. I'm Bill McIntyre. Remember, you can listen to us by searching for this week's Long Island News wherever you listen to podcasts. And we're right here on the radio every Friday at 3 p.m. on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.